letting me do it. Okay. We did last time in Shin Yud Zayin. We started it last time. And we in the Mishnah Berurah, and he has a nice intro. I thought a nice introduction. I shouldn't qualify it, but I thought it was nice. His introduction, just to remind us quickly, the three categories of in terms of kosher. Somebody just shout it out. Give me the Reef Rambam version of the three categories. So
Kayam and not Kayam.
well, Kayam, not Kayam, and what else?
And Uman and not Uman.
Oh, you said okay. You may have said that. I just didn't hear it. Right. So
No, that's okay.
It's a yeah. And so if it's Uman and Kayam, you're what level?
That's Chayav.
Hatat.
Good. Chayav Chatat. If it's one of the two, what are you?
Patur aval asur.
Exactly. And then finally, if you're neither of them,
Mutar lechatchila.
Exactly. Of course, we haven't defined what is a what counts as a maseh uman, but that's okay. We're gonna get there too. That's big. Well, maybe we'll get there. And then for the that's the wrong order. The Rashi Rosh school will go from earlier to later. What are what makes you chayav chatat?
Kaima.
Either of those two. Kaima.
Kaima.
Whether
Kaima.
it's Uman or Masa Hedya.
Yeah, exactly. Uman comes back with the Ramah, but it doesn't really seem to exist in the Rashi Rosh. The later Ashkenazim try to fit it in, right? We'll see this a little bit, but they and then according to the Rashi Rosh, what is Patur aval asur?
Some not leolam, some not kaima length of time.
Yeah, Ez's man. Although we saw there might be some opinions that kaima might be just a long time and may not be leolam, right? So Ez's man is not kaima, right? And what is mutar lechatchila?
Bobayo.
Yeah, and there's some opinions, right? We can actually see it in the Ramah. Says that bobayo means how much actually?
Within 24 hours.
I don't know. There's another version he has.
It actually up to a week.
Exactly right. That's up to a week. Right. That actually is dealing with the gap in the Torah in some ways, right? And Rashi also, right, where the Torah says, bo bayom is mutar, and at a week is patur aval asur. It's like, well, wait a second. Well, what about 3 days? Where are you there? And good. A little bit of a review there. All right, I want to start with the hard stuff. Why not? Maybe one more question. The Taz. I don't know if people were paying attention in class or read it ahead. The Taz thinks this whole thing is based on what?
On your intention.
Yeah, mindset, your intention, your maybe. There we go. Sorry about that. I probably should have muted before I did that, but yeah, mindset. If your intention is to untie it that day versus is your intention to untie it in a while, but for Ezazman, as he calls, and during that Ezazman is Shel Kaima, and that's Asur de Rabbanan, or is it really intention to leave it there until the elements destroy the rope, kind of thing. Okay. He also does another thing. If you remember, what does the Taz say is Maseh Uman? Should have warned you guys there would be a quiz in the email I didn't send out.
Also that we need actually a copy of the Taz.
Yeah.
Like the strength of the knot.
Exactly. Right? Yeah. It's about a strong knot. So good. That's all the information I think we need to dive into this Be'ur Halacha Kosher V'chule. It ain't short. We may not do the whole thing. But let's see. We'll get Ori before he has to leave for carpool. Whenever you leave, you stay in the Shiur, but on the carpool line. Start us out.
I'll take it, but I'm patur this week from carpool duty.
Oh, you are? Oh, good. That's
turns out. That's sorry.
Maybe not good. Maybe you love carpool duty. I don't know, but take us away. Hakosher v'chule.
Kosher v'chule. Da, the kesher she'eno shel kiyama she'en chayavim alav mikri kesher asui shelo lihitkayem bitmidut. So a kesher, a knot that is not of kaima, that you're not chayav on, is a kesher that's made not to last, really just not made to last for some period of time.
Yeah, I think
it's not the word I would.
Yeah.
Oh, to meaning regularly?
Yeah, like I might even be forever, but for a long time. I don't know what he actually means by tamidut. It might be forever, everlasting, but
tamid, yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe just I feel like indefinite. Sorry. I feel like maybe just indefinitely is a word that we've been.
I like that. I like indefinitely.
I mean, it seems like he's saying it doesn't have to actually last forever. It just has to. That's what he's saying. It says asui shelo lihitkayem b'timidut. It doesn't have to last until the sun goes out.
That's a non-kaima knot is
right.
That you're not chayav on.
Yeah, exactly.
Which are we talking about patur?
Yeah, exactly. So
yeah. I wanted to ask you about this earlier in the week, Rav Joel. We've been reading asui meaning something close to intention a lot of the time. But I saw that on Monday, you didn't always read it that way, depending on who, the context of what their larger point was. Like, it's not necessarily this individual's intention, like in the Taz.
This is what the Berurah is going to get into, actually.
That's what I figured.
Or is it the individual, right? Because this is, I think what we're going to say is that type of knot is generally left forever, or that type of knot is generally left for a long time, or that type of knot is the kind of knot you tie and untie in that day.
Yeah.
And the Taz is like, it's about your individual. I don't know, by the way, it's completely that the Taz is against that. He may be like that. People generally think this when they tie it. It might be okay with him as well. It's not obvious to me. It's not mukhrach that he does say with the Mishnah Berurah and the what is it, the Beit I can't remember which what was that? Beit Meir say he says, but maybe he does. This is not, by the way, I found this sometimes. Achronim will sometimes attack each other for things that the other one didn't necessarily say. And I don't know if they're using this as a jumping off point or, it's there's one that in particular that I know there's the Taz. It's the Taz actually attacks the Lavush for a claim about why there's no Su'udah on Hanukkah. And he clearly is going beyond what the Lavush actually said. He's claiming the Lavush said something he didn't actually say. This is kind of interesting.
Straw man.
Yeah, exactly. So
sometimes I think it's a terminology thing because here, asui is a term we've been throwing around for a while, but it's not the meforash, that in the Tazi he gets more clear about what he means by intention, and that was easier to understand. But here, asui shaloli kayem, a knot that was made. Again, is that a knot that was made with the intention, or is that a knot that happened to be made, with that outcome,
exactly,
rather than that intention?
Yeah. And right in here, the Mishnah Berurah is going to get into that question. So
okay.
That's the
So he explains, this I like this. The normal way with this kind of knot is to untie it and not leave it indefinitely. Like they explain in the Gemara, Ketara de Katre Bismama, similar to the one that I imagine they're tying and untying to the camel's nostril.
Exactly.
Even if it's actually done in a strong way, that you can't release with one hand. Mikre ben ledat tarif ve'arambam uben ledat harosh kesher she'enu shel kaima. Really, across the Rishonim, the Rif, the Rambam, and even the Rosh, this wouldn't be a kesher shel kaima. Kevin shadar kosher la kesher hazeh shelo lekaimo b'tmidut, because the normal way with this kind of knot is not to keep it indefinitely.
Mm-hmm.
I like that a lot. It's a little bit of a unifying approach, at least for the moment.
Yes.
Because again, it's not, from what I'm reading, it's not necessarily the individual's intent in that moment. It's the general intention with such a knot.
Exactly. Yes.
And it reminds me of we were discussing the Boy Scout knots that actually are made to untie easily. So some of them obviously would fall into the category of the one hand, and this is not necessarily that.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and keep
But
going.
again, it's still a kind of knot that you're intending to take out. That is usually intended to take out. Okay, we'll get there. Ure'aya mimai detanya b'tosefta. And a proof from what we saw in the Tosefta, v'hareisha hu ledat Rabbi Meir, k'mo shekatav Adarchei Moshe. The reisha of that is about Rabbi Meir. D'chol kesher shel kaima she'achol lahatiro v'achat mi'adav. Any kaima kesher that you actually could undo with one hand, o kesher she'eno shel kaima, or a knot that's not kaima she'en yachol lahatiro v'achat mi'adav, that he can't undo with one of his hands. So either of those criteria, either it being easy enough with one hand, or it's not kaima, and chayavim alav. Those are both, you're not chayiv. They're both patur. V'da'od demashav. I mean, he hasn't gotten to mutar yet, right?
Yeah. This is patur v'asur, and we don't paskin like the ratio. We don't paskin that if it's a shel kaima, but you can latiro bechad me'adav, that it's patur v'asur. That's only Rabbi Meir's opinion, and we don't paskin that. That's like they think that's how the Darchei Moshe brings it up, because the Beit Yosef quotes this breita, and he's like, why does he care about Rabbi Meir's position? Right? He's just kind of like it's a little weird. So, but
he's bringing it because it clarifies the meaning of kaima.
It does, exactly. Yes, I think that's really what's going on there. So okay.
V'da'od dema sheposek b'shulchan aruch dekesher u'maaseh uman chayav, and what the Shulchan Aruch says, that a kesher maaseh uman is chayav, hu afilu oto hakesher. That's even the same knot, lo mihadak shapir, not so tight. V'yachol lahatiro b'achat mi'adav, and he can undo with one hand. U'chamo shekatav b'mishnah Berurah, v'chein pasak b'darchei Moshe, ki Rabbanan plige al Rabbi Meir. The Rabbanan argue with Rabbi Meir, she'amar di'achol lahatiro b'achat mi'adav patur, that the loosening with one hand would have made it patur, but the Rabbanan argue with that. וכמו שכתב בספר יראים, לכן מוכח מפירוש המשניות לרמב"ם והרב שהם פליגי. וסברי דחייבים, that they're arguing and they think that it is chayev. והלכה כמותם. Again, this is מעשה אומן. That's
exactly מעשה אומן, and it is, but you can undo it with, it's shel kaima, you can undo it with one hand. They think that's chayev. So
right. והלכה כמותם. וכמו שפסקו כל אלו הפוסקים הנ"ל, and that's the halacha, like all these poskim I mentioned, ומוכח בגמרא דקשר כזה לא מיהדק, and it was clear in the Gemara that this is not a tight knot, ועל כורחך באופן דהבי מעשה אומם, and because it's forced, because it's a maaseh uman.
I think it has to be. I think it must be that we're talking about a maaseh uman here, and he'll tell you why. Right. If not, right?
Right. Dilav hachim, and if it wasn't, if we weren't talking about a maaseh uman, no mechayve the tarif Rambam, then it wouldn't have been chayav for the Rif and the Rambam. Right. The maaseh uman nikra afilu lo miyadak shapir. If it's actually a maaseh uman, even if it's not that tight.
Exactly. Therefore, there is a maaseh uman knot, right? That is shel kaima, that it's easy to release, and nonetheless, it's not tight, right? So therefore, it's and you're chayav. So good. Who's he challenging right here?
The Taz.
Definitely
Yes,
the Taz.
The Taz.
Potentially Rashi.
But maybe, but he's really taking on the Taz.
Okay.
Yeah, at the end of the day, and he'll say this. He's going to say this out. I just wanted to. This is why I wanted to do this whole thing. He's going to take on the Taz. In all things. All right, Ori, we're going to take a little break here. You've been doing great, but Max, take over.
ולפי זה, לכאורה צריך עיון על הטז, שכתב דמעשה אומן נקרא כשהקשר חזק מאוד, ואפשר דכוונתו שהוא חזק מאוד, היינו שלא יהיה nitar b'shum ofen me'atzmo kederach ha'uman hayodea ofen tikun asiyato. Okay, so we need to work on the Taz's opinion. He said that ma'ase uman is when it's a strong knot, and where it seems like the intention of having made a strong knot was that it isn't going to be undone.
Well, I think he's trying to explain the Taz now. Maybe
the kavanato of the Taz and not necessarily the kosher.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, and it's okay. So maybe the Taz meant that when it's a strong knot that can't be undone by any old individual, or I guess by the individual who tied it.
Oh, no, not even that. But often smo, like on its own. In other words, it could be a quick release knot. It's just not going to come undone by it.
It's not going to come undone unless someone does something.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. In the same way that that an uman who knows how to do such a thing would make such a knot.
Exactly. Right. So he's explained that he's not going to attack the Taz again in a minute. But he's like, all right, I get it. Actually, there are really good knots that are quick release knots, but that actually, if you don't release them, they're going to stay there forever. And who knows how to tie that? I mean, an uman, right? That's actually, in some ways, that is the ultimate. This is the you brought up the case of your child with the knots on the shoe or whatever, the incredibly knotted shoe, right? Is like any hedyot can tie a lasting knot, that's hard to undo. But it's like takes a real specialist to tie a easy to undo knot that's lasting. And that is a chayav knot. It may be also in some ways the ultimate version of maseh uman. So okay. Keep going. מעשה הדיוט.
ומעשה הדיוט הוא כשהקשר אינו עשוי בטוב שיכול לפעמים במשך הזמן להיות ניתר מעצמו. And מעשה הדיוט is a kesher that isn't made in a way that maybe over the course of time it'll come undone on its own.
Exactly.
What is this Aleph Lamed? Is that what this
is? Oh, the inlak challenge this.
Okay.
That means a knot that could come out eventually.
That could come out on its own.
Right. So. Yeah, exactly. Sorry. Hopefully, that's what I thought I heard you say. Right. So in other words, maseh uman is that it's not going to come undone by itself. Maseh hediot might be that it comes undone on its own. Right. That's the difference. So.
Got it. Okay. All right. Imkain amai palik harosh al harif bisvarazo. So how can the rosh argue with the rif with that svara, with that uman svara?
Exactly. That actually sounds just like the Rosh's case. How could there be a difference between the two of them? So
Okay. Yesh lomar darosh svira le dekivanshu oseoto kedeshi kayem leolam matsuihu she oseoto shelo yenitar matzmo. Umashi kre lefamim shu nitar ein batal yedezeh shem kesher kaimam meno. Okay, so the Rosh thinks that since it's made in a way that's going to last, and that it won't come undone on its own, even if sometimes it does come undone on its own, that doesn't it doesn't invalidate the significant majority of times when it does stay.
Yeah, or doesn't it make it not a kesher shel kaima, right? So in other words, in the Reach school, if it's not a maseh uman, it's not, like if it's the kind of thing that's going to come undone on its own, it loses the status of kesher shel kaima. And in the Rosh's school, no, okay, you meant for it to be kaima, because that's not, or this not meant to be, but I just didn't do a good job tying it.
So would
I
it be
don't-
fair? Would it be fair to turn around and say then that the one school is considered about the class or types of knots that one ties as a whole, and the other side is saying no, it's this particular knot, whether it itself, and in other words, you can tie a fantastic, Uman knot, or you could tie a crappy one. And if you
Exactly.
do it, if you aren't good at tying a knot that's meant to be shalkaima, and it turns out to not last that long, and it shakes itself loose, then that would be patra al balasur. But if you tied it right, it would be
Well, to the
chayav.
Rosh, if you tie it for kaima, even though you do a bad job, he'd say, no, still chayav, right? And the Reef would say, well, no, because you're tying a bad knot, you can't be chayav for this, right? So even if it does last for kaima for the Reef, he's like, well, you shouldn't have lasted for kaima. So like, even if you meant that, even if it does, no, so it's really about, whether or not they care if the knot should be lasting forever or not is the question for them. So, or has the capability of lasting lekaima. Okay, this is an interesting theory. I'm just trying to give you guys as many theories as I can of like how all of this works. But this is going to cause a problem. So do it, Max. Do a little bit more.
Okay. That et pale alataz shekatav diladat harosh v'ator hakol telui b'dat ha'adam hakosher l'chud dim datod sheyishaer kan le'olam have kesher shel kaima v'im lizmanhu patur v'asor v'im dato lahatiro biyomo mutar lechatchila yen sham. Okay, so that's just just summarizing the Taz.
Mm-hmm.
ולפי זה, אפילו בקשר הגמלין והספנין גופה, או בקטרי דאושקפה, אם דעתו בעת הקשר להתירו ביומו, אין עליו שם קשר כלל, אפילו עשהו אושקפה בעצמו. Right, I guess what that would mean is that these cases, which were our paradigm cases of chayav in the Gemara, right? If the shoemaker or the camel driver or the sailor, whoever, does it in a way that it's going to be undone that day, actually,
not in a way. They just like, I'm going to undo this knot.
Or right, that's their dot when they do when they tie. Seems like that would be mutter.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Even if like the professional did it,
right?
Like the shoemaker's like, I show up to the shoemaker and the shoemaker says, oh, I can make you a shoe for the day. I'm going to do it just like I do any other shoe. Do the same knots. I'm just untie it after Shabbos so that you're not chayav.
Right.
So I'm not
like there's a way of reading the Taz that actually he would go against the Mishnah.
Exactly.
Kind of.
Yeah. So. Or at least have an exception to it, which seems to like get us out of all interesting problems that we get ourselves into in the Gemara. So it's like crazy. Okay. You want to do a little bit more? Or should we switch to Reuben? Is it
either way? I'm happy to.
Let's see. Let's go to Reuben. We'll get some voices. Josie, I'm right. You're not. We're not gonna have you read if that's okay, right? Or that'd be preferable to you? Yeah. Okay. So Reuben, please.
Okay. Okay. ולפי עניות דעתי צריך עיון גדול בזה. דנראה דקשר שדרכו של עולם לעשותו בקביעות לא אזלינן בתר מחשבת הכושר לבטל שם קשר ממנו. ומה דמצייר הגמרא במנהל בקשר דרבנן ובסנדל בקיטרא דקטרי אינהו, היינו באותן האנשים שדרכן שאין עושים הקשר שלהן בקביעות רק לפי שעה. Should I stop here? Should I keep going?
I stop there for a minute. Yeah.
Okay. So, in my humble opinion, we really need to investigate this because it seems like that a knot that is like it's the normal way of tying this knot is that it should last forever. It should be very long lasting.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when lasoto bikviut. That's independent of it also being long lasting. It's like it's supposed to be.
I think that means it is long lasting. Yeah.
Oh, and it actually okay. So it's shaldarko shalam to make it long lasting. in such a case that we don't go after the the thought process of the person who's tying the knot, such that it would no longer be considered. Levatel shem kesher mimenu, like such that it wouldn't be considered a kesher.
Yeah, and there was, remember the Taz's language is it's no longer considered a kesher. It's if you're going to release it in the Beyomo, right?
That's right. Okay, that's right.
Yeah.
Thank you. I remember that.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
Right.
But
So in a case of
I was going to say, I think in the Taz's world, he essentially is saying, why can you release a kesher that you really, why are you allowed to tie a kesher that you're going to release that same day, right? That you intend to release that same day? Because it's not a kesher, right? He's like, actually, ksharim or asur. What's permitted? Something that may look like a kesher is not really a kesher.
So in the in the Taz's world, that book I had of like practice tying knots, you could actually do that according to the Taz on Shabbat, all day on Shabbat, as long as you untie it before the end of the day. You could tie the gnarliest, nastiest, most bestest knot just for funsies, as long as you untie it. In the Taz's world, we don't necessarily paskin that way.
You don't even have to untie it. You just have to intend on untying
exactly.
it.
Yeah.
Even more,
you're
But you're right, because it's practiced, and your intention is to like keep playing with it. You're not trying to tie something tight.
Yeah. In fact, actually, like if I have, right, usually those knot books come with a little rope, right? You're not
gonna have the little rope there, yeah.
Yeah, you're not gonna use it to tie anything. You're just like you're gonna do it to practice the knot. They don't give you enough rope to use it, make it useful. Just to make the knot itself. And so you're like, okay, that's proof already there. If that's what you're tying, is that little piece of rope that they came with the book. Yeah, your intention is to untie the day. Versus the Mishnah Berurah is like, what? No, this is crazy. Okay. Although he's going to seem in this whole thing, he's going to be like, well, maybe it's actually not always about the knot, but the class of people who tie them too might be the case as well.
He brought in an important term that I think it really brings the conversation forward to another level, which is Darko Shalolam. Darko Shalolam is new in our conversation. I mean, it could be that was what people anciently meant, but like I said, we went from Asui that I think was a little bit open to the Taz really making more about Da'at, and now he's saying that seems crazy. There's something called Darko Shalolam, like what kind of knots come with normal types of intentions.
Exactly. And we do have a principle, right? Batel dato etzel kol adam, right? That somebody who is doing something unusual, or like your thought process doesn't count, right? Even if we sometimes count people's thought process, we do it for the general case, not for this, sui generis case. Although he doesn't bring that term up in this piece, but I was thinking about that. So, okay. Where were we? Ruben, you were reading, right?
Yes, and then
were we at Umab de Mitzayer Hagemara B'min Aleph B'Kesher D'Rabbanan?
Yes, I haven't translated that part yet. So all these cases that the Gemara brings, the rabbinic sandals and the knots that people are tying and untying that same day, this has to do with people whose way is not to make a knot long lasting. Rather, it should just lasts a short time. I'm sure it's not litzlab davka shah achat, but it's it's a short time.
A short time. So.
And those cases in the Gemara are patur v'lasor. Those cases
exactly, but they are right. And he's going to get. This is the issue. Is it sounds like the sandal or the D'Rabbanan kesher D'Rabbanan may not be a different kesher from the ushkapeh. It just might be that it's the type. How do you use the kesher, right? Are you doing it? Is it something you're sometimes untying, sometimes not, or is it supposed to be there forever? And this is what he's getting into. That actually seems to support the Taz in some ways, right? It's all about the different people. And in fact, right, the next case he's going to bring up, if you remember, there's the case of two people using the same shoe. And originally, I don't remember who the Rav says it's chayav. And he's like, chayav, I was asking about, is it asur or not? I was asking, he's like, why do you think that? He's like, because two people use the shoe. Sounds like the same knot could be both chayav, patur, and mutar, right? Not both. It can be all three things. And that seems to support Taz's claims. The Mishnah Berurah has got to fight against that here. He's going to be like, no, don't understand that. It's not about the individual person. It's about the class of people tying the knot. The darchei shel olam, the darko shel olam. So, okay, so keep going with that.
Okay. וזה דמה לעניין חיובה לסנדל דנפקה בתרי, דמוכח שם דלא מקרה קשר. והיינו אפילו אם עשהו חזק כאין קיטרא דאושקפה, כדמוכח שם בגמרא, עיין שם ברש"י. So, okay, so, and this is similar to the case, when he says לעניין חיובה לסנדל, that's, I forget, which rabbi said that in the case of, was it Rabbi Yehuda who shared the shoes with his son? I forget the.
Yeah, it was Rav Yehuda was the one who had the shoes, and Abaye was the one who's answering the question.
Abaye said it was he was chayav at first, and then rescinded his position. So when Abaye said you would be chayav for regularly sharing a pair of shoes with someone else, and in that case, it's not called a kesher proper. It's not really properly or not. And this is even the case if you are tying your shoes on very tightly, like the Kitra de Ushkafe. Right, and then he's pointing us to the Gemara and to look at the Rashi's explanation. Umita'am de la'anashim ka'elu ein derech shel ha'kesher hazeh litkayem, ma she'ein ken be'inyanenu le'inyan ushkafe, shederech kol ha'olam she'osim kesher al zeh b'kvi'ut, vehu gam ken asahu chazak karaoi. לא אזלינן בתר דעתו שהוא חושב להתירו ביומו, ויתבטל על ידי זה שם קשר ממנו. I'm going to pause there. Okay, and from the reasoning that these folks, these people, it's not for these people, it's not their way to make a long-lasting knot. When he says anashim ke'elu, he's referring to like the case of people who share shoes in the case of
a class of people.
This class of people.
It's the class of people that's important and not the individual. So maybe it's not always the knot that's important, but it's the class of people is important at least. So,
but then still by class of people, is he not just referring to ordinary folks who are changing their shoes regularly, or is he still referring to is he being more specific than that?
No, I think he's talking about like it's maybe even class of people isn't the right thing, but like how is that person, the normal person, tying the knot in that situation? How are they tying it? And not the individual, the miut situation of like, oh, there's a guy who's gonna like tie the knot, but wants to untie it that day, even though it doesn't look like that situation where you would untie it the same day. So,
okay, so that for that class of people,
or you look like you wanted to say.
I'm just trying to add language to make that really clear. Like would it make sense to say class of people? Class of knot tires.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. You see my point? Like it's not Rabbanan and simple people, something like that. It's instances of that are common among knot tires, like shoe sharers. There's common ways that knotting is done.
Exactly.
And what the intention of those knots are.
So, and it may look, shoe sharers may look like a knot that you'd be chayav for, but because they're shoe sharers, then it's clearly not the case. So that
because shoe sharers often adjust. They often have to adjust those shoes. They expect when I tie this knot, I expect I'm going to be adjusting it later.
Exactly. So
okay, so you have the class of people, for example, the shoe sharers whose way of tying is not to make a long-lasting knot, and that's not the case for example, the case of the ushkave, in which case the knot is designed to be very long-lasting. And then this v'hukam ken asau chazak ra'oi. Is that in reference to the anashim ke'elu who are tying knot? Who are tying?
No, the ushkafe, like everybody ties the ushkape knot. Why is the ushkape knot mentioned there, right? Because everyone ties the ushkape knot really well, and means it for it to last, is what he's saying. So there's some knots that like everybody, no matter the class, they're gonna tie it to be really good, and ushkape is one of those. Like the shoemaker's knot, you're gonna tie really well. So
yeah, I think I'm just confused by this clause here, "Who gam ken asau chazak karawe." What that's
yeah. Oh, it's if you do an ushkape and you do it well, I think is what he means, right?
Oh, okay. So that's necessary condition. If you do an ushkafe, which and the intention there, well, maybe not intention, but the method there is always bikfiut, and you do it well.
Mm-hmm.
You do it appropriately, strongly, appropriately well. And in such a case, we're not going after the dot of anyone. That's
Mhm.
Okay, lo azlinan batar da'ato, shu choshev latiro biyomo, v'yitbatel al yedei zeh shem kesher mimenu. So we're not going after anyone's dot because wait.
Yeah, in the
We're still
case,
referring
right?
to
where,
the ushkafe case here.
yeah.
Okay.
Remember the tie. You could say, yeah, what about the guy who ties the ushkape but wants to untie it that day, or is just
Right.
playing around?
It
He's like,
doesn't.
we
It
don't
doesn't.
follow.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
But is he making an exception if I happen to be bad at the ushkafe knot?
Yeah, I think so. I think if you tie a bad ushkape, then that's maybe a surah, but not chayah.
If you don't do it chazak karawi, maybe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if I'm a novice at tying knots, then it's probably not shel kaima. So it's maybe not on the knot. It also has to do you have to do it well.
Because that would get you out of any halacha, right? I mean, if I were to intend on breaking Shabbat in some other way, but mess it up, I might be asur of a patur, right? Like if I don't know if that's a good example, but meaning he's
No,
not,
it is.
it doesn't batel shem kesher, but it's not really doing it either.
Yeah, this is part of the whole thing with shinui, right? It's like you're doing the
That's what I was
action.
going to say.
Yeah, it's same thing. We're doing Berurah next week, right? Berurah, we're gonna get if like you do a bad job, if you do Berurah in a bad way, you may still be asur, right? Maybe batur, but it may be asur. If you do it really, really badly, then maybe it's allowed. Okay. I'm trying to think in terms of time. We've taken a lot of time. I want to stop here with this. I think this is just like we now have the theory of the Mishnah Berurah, right? Which is that, yeah, it's not always on the knot, but it's on a class of people as opposed to the individual person's dot, right? Which is the important thing. So, and so he's fighting the Taz on this.
Yeah. So I'm still trying to figure out if you were a professional knot tier, would you be forbidden from tying your shoes on Shabbat?
Good. I think to the Mishnah Berurah you say no, because generally the class of people who are shoe tires, even if you're personally a professional knot tire, right? People when they tie their shoes to undo it.
Oh, so it's the class of people tying that knot. So
exactly.
It's that Venn diagram intersection of people and knots.
Exactly. Yes.
I think anybody can step into different classes depending on the situation. It's more on the classes of situations because a professional shoe tire still doesn't use, it's not the same kind of knot situation when I go to tie my shoes, a single knot. He's stepped into the exact same world as all of us when we tie our shoes, as opposed to when, he's tying. Also, they're living in a world, if I understand correctly, where there's a type of knot that's literally like the weave of the shoe, like it's creating a shoe.
It is. Yes,
the
that's the
ushkafe
ushkafe,
case.
right?
Yeah.
No, it's not like although there's some interesting questions about can you lace shoes on Shabbos? Rav Avadia Yosef says yes, actually remember correctly. But although we'll see maybe from the Shulchan you can't do it for the first time. Their shoes are put together by a knot, essentially, right? That they're being held together in a way that ours are not.
So when you say lacing shoes, like for example, if you have a pair of boots that need to be that in order to be put on, you don't just like tie the laces. You actually have to put thread the almost not quite, almost weave the shoelaces through holes, right?
Yeah, that might be
Rav
okay.
Avadia Yosef, would it be okay? Would that be okay according to other?
I gotta double check. I think for a lot of people it would be, especially if you're already for most of the boots, you don't actually put them through the holes. You put them through like the hooks at that point.
No, I'm talking about holes. I'm talking about my Doc Martens.
Yeah, holes might be a little bit. It might be a little bit more controversial.
I mean, this is actually important. Like when I stand guard at synagogue, I wear boots.
Yeah. So let me find the Rav Avadia. We'll see one piece here that may be helpful too. I think today, in our next in the next half an hour we have together. Wow, we did a lot on the Berurah. I thought this might take us a while without even doing it, but I hope that's helpful because I just I wanted to. One of the two things I really want to get from this is one is it's very hard to create a theory around all of this, and the way you have to do it is like you have to balance it between the knot and the tire and the class of people, like in the situation and all that, and figure out like how do we make these determinations? They're very difficult. So, and also like as a posek, I think I'm not a posek, but you guys are all learning how to be. Maybe one day I'll be too. That when someone comes to you with a question, you can also question b'diavad and all that stuff, but like you can rely on certain of these theories, for certain things, or put certain theories together to be lenient about certain of these questions, or be strict about some of these questions. You're like, I don't know, that's venturing towards deoraita, or this one now it's pretty clearly in the Rabbanan at best. It's probably mutar according to some theories, and like maybe we have some fake the Rabbanan, kind of thing. And so
Just to bring, I put that shoe in the chat during Shiur last week, but I got when I had a back injury a few years ago, and I didn't want every day to like have to bend down to tie my shoes, and so I got these shoes that like they're basically slip-on shoes that remain tied. And I've been trying for the last week and a half to remember if when the shoes came they had already been tied by the manufacturer, or if I or someone tied them the first time, because like that actually, according to some opinions, like might be the difference between whether or not that's Dirabanan or Diraisa. And like it's just one of those cases that like there actually like might be a serious chashash there for that if you were to tie that shoe on Shabbos.
I do, maybe I'll say this, look, I think, and I've had this own experience myself. I actually like before Shabbos to go. Sometimes some pairs of shoes that I have, I do not untie every time I put them on and take them off. Right, I leave them tied, and those I like to untie before Shabbos in case I'm gonna wear them. Where it's like, I show that I sometimes do it, or maybe even during the week untie it every day, just in case, like to make it more clear. But like if I were stuck, someone came to me and said, like, Joel, there are these shoes I really I need to wear for Shabbos. Maybe the weather requires me to wear them. And yeah, I didn't untie them recently. They've been tied for the last couple days, or sometimes I leave them that way. But I do always untie them every week. I mean, like, hey, maybe we can rely on the Ramah there, on the second opinion in the Ramah, where it's like, yeah, 7 days is the standard, not 1 day, and again, we're only hitting a derabanan only, but we're hitting a derabanan, so it's a fake derabanan. Maybe there's room to be lenient, especially for great sorech, or maybe there's sar.
Well, it
right?
sounds like the Mishnah Berurah is pointing us away from your individual use of those shoes as being so important. I mean, the kula or the chumrah, I'm not so sure, but like, if it's a kind of shoe
Good.
that by less lazy people,
Yes.
normal consumers, it's being sold to be tied every day or whatever on use, and you happen to all the time slip them on and off. I think if I'm understanding the Mishnah Berurah here, it doesn't really matter what you do. That's a class of shoe that's a temp that you tie every day.
Exactly. No, it's a good point. I think that the problem is there are lots of classes of people who leave their shoes untied, tied and slip them on and off.
Yeah, it becomes like this cultural question of where you draw these lines. I mean, Max shoes was the most interesting because the shoe was like literally being marketed to be pre-tied, or if that's the right word. So that
Exactly.
interests me. But like if you're doing that with a pair of sneakers, do you say sneakers or do you say tennis shoes like my wife?
I say both. So yeah.
I grew up in New York saying sneakers. I'm like, those are sneakers. Like serious people tie those when they wear them.
Yeah. It's
Right, and like how does Hediot shift? Like you said serious people. Like how does Hediot shift between like right? Where's the normal consumer on this? Is like a weird question of an answer.
Yeah, I like bringing in marketing as like as something that I think is so part of our world of expectations that I don't know if any of the Achronim got to in this case. But the way things are marketed and sold, because that's such a constant and fast part of our lives, really seems to would make it really quite determined.
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting question about how marketing determines a halacha category. And I wonder if there are poskim who deal with that. None that come to mind at the moment, but maybe there is one I've read before that I can't think of.
I mean, I don't know if it was when we were doing the cans. The cans are basically marketed to be one-time use. I think that came into our discussion with I forget who the Achron was.
Oh, it was a
Moshe?
Sifas, I think. So but Rav Lannis' great grandfather. That's
Oh,
yeah. But okay, good. So these are all things to think about. And also, look, I want to push this again. I think, as a personal practice, maybe it's wrong of me to push people's personal practice, but I think it's never a bad idea to like do things before Shabbos to show that you want to, like my preference is to like be tying, only day-long knots on Shabbos, or to like set up your week a little bit around Shabbos sometimes. Even though you don't think necessarily that there's any problem with it, but do it a little bit extra of prep before Shabbos in that stuff. And also, if you forget, then don't freak out. And my teacher Rav Shmuel Lewis has said to me, he says, if the halacha is causing you incredible psychological stress, you're probably approaching it wrong at the end of the day. So, it's yeah. Why he's had to say that to me is another question, but okay.
Just, Rav Joel, I wanted to ask if memory serves, aren't the quote unquote rabbinic shoes, could those be akin to a sort of class of people who typically don't untie? They don't knot their shoes very tightly because they know they don't untie them every day. So I feel like the rabbinic shoe, it's not a class of shoe, it's a class of use of shoe.
It is.
So it
Yes.
could be akin to, I mean, it's still a sore, but it could be akin to that. Like I have had periods in my life when I was a teenager where I did that. I always tied my sneakers very loosely because I knew I was never going, on the rare occasion that I did untie and then retie them, because I knew I was just going to slip them on.
Yeah, I mean, I think the answer to that is and therefore on Shabbos, like slip them on, don't untie them.
Yeah.
The question is, what if they come untied on Shabbos?
Which they're more likely to, because they're not tied very tightly.
And look, maybe the answer is, I'm going to rely on the Taz, or rely on the fact that there's a class of people who do tie them, and I'll tie it like almost like a knot that it will be hard to slip off and put on, so I know that I have to untie it. It's almost like you have to do the better knot to make sure you untie it. It's like or maybe use a different pair of shoes. Also possible, assuming you have a different pair. Like I'm not. That's a huge assumption.
Of course.
Yeah. These are all things to consider at the end of the day. Or you rely heavily on a Taz, and you're like, when I tie this knot, my thought process, I'm going to untie it after Shabbos, or during Shabbos, any of those things. Okay. Let's do
That's such an interesting case, because that could, like, according to somebody who would say, hey, that's really us, or you'd be tying it, and then also when you untie it, you'd also be being over something.
Yes.
So, I mean, like, it totally depends on how you're looking at it. What that untying would be.
Yeah, if you don't buy the ties, then I've done both. Kosher
twice.
Yeah, it's like it could be a major problem. So so it's two different malachot, right? That's two sacrifices I have to bring to the mizbeach eventually. And not just that. We don't just do things because we don't want to bring a chatat, right? Okay. I want to go. I would go just because Josie brought it up. I want to go to Bet for a second, and then we will come backwards in the Shulchan Aruch. I'll read Bet in the Shulchan Aruch. I don't even know if I did this one in class or not. But here we go. Bet nishmetu lo ritzuot min alva sandal. So your straps on your shoe or your sandal slips. Oh, shnishmat rov regular. Most of the leg slips out. Mutalach zero ritzuot l'mkoman. You can return the this is actually maybe a thing about the shoe. Like that shoe comes untied, you can return the strap to its place. Uvad shaloik short. Don't tie it, right? In other words, you kind of like stick it in there in the spot, but you don't tie it up. And the Rama is v'davka shuchalach zero below torach, right? As long as you can do it easily. Aval im sarich torach hazeh asur. You can't like snap it into place in a very difficult manner. Why? Because then we're going to think if you had to get it in there really hard, you're going to tie it up. So, but what I wanted to look at here was Sif Katan Ted Zayin in the Mishnah Berurah. This was, yes, Nishmatu. So maybe, Ori, do you want to read for us?
Yep. נשמטו וכולי, אבל במנהל חדש אסור ליתן רצועות בשבת, אפילו אם הנקב רחב. So if you have a new shoe, you can't put the ritzuot back on Shabbat, even if the opening is wide. Dimatakin mana, because that actually would be completing or fixing. V'hu adin b'sarbal o b'michasayim chadashim. This would be also with so sarbal is a belt.
I thought it was a headpiece, but maybe not.
I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, something. So I'll look it up while we do this. It's
or pants. New asur lachnish hamitzot o mishicha. You can't put in the strap or tighten. Mishicha meaning
mishicha is the rope. A rope.
rope.
Yeah, or a string. Yeah.
Zimavatel hatam umikri mitakin mana. Because those actually are mevatel, meaning they're become part of the garment. You're sort of creating and finishing the garment by putting those things in. But like a belt you could put in, even with the new pants. That doesn't become part of the pants. That's actually a separate belt. And that's made to put in and take out all the time, regularly. This is interesting to me, like those, I'm thinking of the rope you put in the hoodie. Of course, this is the worst thing in the world if you have to stick one of those in. You know, something that comes out, it really is part of the clothing and would be great tircha also.
So say that's a real tircha to try to do that.
Exactly. Yeah. So, I think it does sound like you probably couldn't lace shoes for the first time on Shabbos, right? That's for sure. That might be meant to
why a new shoe only though?
Okay, assuming because it never had a strap in it before is the idea, right? This is the first time if the strap falls out, you're not making it was already a shoe. It already had but if the strap never there, then it wasn't a shoe yet, essentially, kind of thing.
It's so interesting because this sounds like a principle I'm not familiar with mitakin mana. Is that similar to makeh patish?
Yeah, it is. It is makeh patish. Yeah.
So that only applies the first time it's becoming a kli?
It applies if the thing was already used, then and it was a full kli, then yeah, it probably isn't mitakin mana, I think, in that case. So
expanding my mind right now.
Yeah, I think that's right. There is we do think for broken things there could be a problem with putting them back together, but it may be a derabanan at that
point. I would think if I pulled the whole shoelace out of the shoe, it's now back to its parts, and if I put it back together, I'm making it again. But
yeah, Go ahead. No, go for it.
Whenever I'm like arguing the machmir version of something, it's because I'm actually seeking the kula. Just so I'm sure you know this, you can sense that. I want to really test and poke this idea because it's a real type of kula to say that you can only really do mitakin mana when the thing is new. That would apply in some really different cases that I don't think we've applied it.
Yeah. No, I think that's an interesting point. I got to think about that a little bit more before I say that, because I may come back in like 24 hours and be like, well, I can't believe I said that. So I got to think through that. By the way, I actually think it's very important on any halachic thing to not decide I'm going to be machmer, I'm going to be makil, but rather be open to both the chumrah and the kula, and then depend on the case and the need, right, for people. What's actually before you, what's the person standing before you, and what are they needing, and then you can decide, okay, do I want to be makil or machmer? And I think it's perfectly acceptable to say to one person asur and the next person mutar in the same case. It's you gotta be careful because one of them might report to the other and be like, what would you do? It's but I think
why didn't you stick the knife in the ground for me?
Exactly. I think Hashem is gonna be like, I'm glad you did that. You made the right choice. Like that person needed a heter, that person didn't need a heter.
And that's what I meant about poking to the chumrah, because I think you need to really understand the intention of the chumrah as to know where to apply it or where to apply the kula, right? Like
Yeah. So while we're on this topic, we're gonna let's jump to hay for a second here, because we didn't get to
Can I
talk
ask
about
out
this.
just a really quick question?
Yeah, of course, Max.
When in bet there, when he says afilu im hanekev rachav,
Yes, good.
is that about the tircha?
I think so.
That
Yeah.
if it's okay.
Not a lot of tircha. Yeah. So,
And
but,
if you've ever purchased a new pair of sneakers, you know the first time you lace that lace through, it's often you gotta wiggle the little sniglet through so that it
exactly. Yeah, yeah. It's you're definitely opening the hole more at that point, right? This is so um, good. Um, we could get into questions that is that psik ratio or not, Devar Shem Kaven and all that, but let's just go to hay. We didn't talk too much about bows and loops or whatever you want to call them. So we talked a little bit in class, but I wanted to do this piece here. So hay in the Shulchan Aruch says aniva mutar, all right? A bow or a loop is permissible. The love kesher is not a kesher. Ve'afil, and this is the Haggah, ve'afilu imasa kesher achat lemata noagim bo heter, right? Even if you make a knot below it, right? This is the shoelace, right? You have a base, and then you have a loop or a bow, and he says we are nohagim bo heter. We have this tradition that we allow it. This is from the Agur, right? Good Ashkenazi source, but I always wonder, like when he says no agimbo heter, does the Rama mean we still do this in my day, or just like the Ashkenazi tradition has been this? It's or like in Krakow in my time, this is what we're doing. Could be that as well. But okay, there's a Mishnah Berurah on this too. Sif Katan Kaftet. It's the only one here. Max, or you just read, right? Yeah. So Max, go for it. Read for us.
נוהגין בו היתר. בכתבו האחרונים, עד נוהגין היתר בקשר אחד למטה, היינו דווקא כשעשוי להתיר בו ביום. ומשום דעל ידי עניבה על גב קשר, עדיין אינו נקרא מעשה אומן. אבל אם היא לקיימה על איזה זמן, כגון בלולה וכיוצא בו, אסור לעשות קשר למטה, אלא עניבה בלבד. ורשאי לעשות שתי עניבות זה על גב זה, Okay. So the Achronim write that the minhag to be makil here is about one kesher beneath, but only if it's done if it's going to be untied that day or within 24 hours or something like that. Because through having done that aniva on top of a kesher, it definitely isn't numan.
Exactly.
But if you're trying to do it for a long time, like you're doing a lulav that you're going to need for several days, then it's asur. And the only permitted thing in that case for several days is just the aniva.
Exactly.
But you can do two anivot. You can do two anivot, but not kesher, or I guess it would be kesher al gabe aniva if it's for several days.
Or you can do aniva al gabe kesher for several days.
That's right.
Yeah, but you can do aniva al gabe aniva without a problem. So this is now what this looks like in reality. You got to play around with a little bit, but you can do this. This happens. My lulav often comes undone, maybe because I shake it too hard. I don't know. Or maybe that's proof that it's just a bad knot to begin with. It's not a kesher shel uman, so you can retie it, in a way that's just not a real knot. You can just, use a way to kind of hold it together. Potentially, you could probably put a rubber band over it too, right? The whole question would be matak and mana there. That would be the other question, right? Are you making something that wasn't a kosher to use kosher? But yeah. And if you want the same species, you could. Well, he says you do have to.
Right? Isn't that Gidul min haaretz? Isn't that also a piece of it? Isn't Gidul min haaretz also a piece of?
Yes, that's the thing. I think you do. Yeah, you can maybe put like a rubber band around the like a piece of lulav or something around it. I don't know. I have to think also hilchot sukkah, hilchot lulav. So yeah, but you do. It has to be gidulei haaretz if I remember correctly. So, but yeah, people do that. They do a thing on top, right? Some people do like a metal piece on top of the
Ruben and I read some when we did this in Hadar a few years ago, and there was some sort of fancy, some tshuva we read with about someone's fancy covering for a lulav. I don't remember who it was.
I wish I
Yeah.
remembered the details. Yeah, but I remember that.
I've seen it.
Metal, right? It was made of metal.
Yes, yeah, I
Yeah.
think so.
It was, or gold or something. Yeah.
Okay. Let me see. Let's go back to Seif Aleph now. It's just a couple of things to tie up. Sorry, I just can't help myself. It's really it's a disease.
Can I just go quick
Yeah, of
question
course.
to make sure I understand this? The kesher lamata, this is a real kesher, or this is like what we do in shoelaces, where you just loop
Good
it?
question. I think it's what this is, but I'm not sure. Yeah.
Yeah, because then he's not really saying, when he says Nagim bo heter, he's not really saying you can tie a kesher and tie an aniva on top. He's saying in this case that we all know about, where we do that like sort of pre-kesher, because
Yeah.
that's not even, it can't even last a second. It's only its combination with the aniva that even makes it like a temporary thing. And I feel like that is his intention because it's an obvious use. But then does the Mishnah Berurah need to go out of his way to say that could be lekaima?
Yeah, because otherwise, if you might think it's the same as just an aniva, and he's like, no, it's not the same thing as just an aniva. You know, because just an
This
aniva.
idea that an aniva is always allowed is sort of like what he was saying in the Biur Halacha. Like definitionally, an aniva is not shalkaima. Whatever
Yes.
you intend, it's
But-
an aniva is you're building a thing that you can pull out. That's what an aniva is.
Yeah, I don't know if it's that we're posking like Rebbe Meir so much there, as I think this aniva is just not a kesher as far as they're concerned. That's a different category.
Oh, even less than
Yeah.
yeah,
So-
but even isn't that for the same reason? Because it's not a kesher, it's something that is made right. So I was saying it's not kaima, but like it's not even a kesher. But then anyway, my point is yes, if there's a kesher underneath it, I could see the Mishnah Berurah wanting to like clarify this. But if it's this kind of not real knot that we all know, I don't know what you do in lulav if it's similar to a shoe or it's actually a kesher.
Well, the usual one is like very complicated, like your tefillin. Like, it's
Yeah.
like but it's actually a very professional knot. But what you can do, I actually have done this. I have done an aniva around my lulav, like just mainly partially that wasn't even on Chag, I think maybe it was like during Chol Moed of like I have no clue how to redo this thing. I'm just gonna find some way to use this piece of lulav to tie the three species together.
I think it's similar because when you first wrap it in itself one time, you're doing it with the lulav on the inside. So
Yes.
it's like almost like a kesher that can't close like it would if there was nothing inside of it.
Mhm.
Isn't that
Yes.
essentially what we do with our shoes? Like it's like a knot, but because there's a shoe in the way, it doesn't tighten that.
It doesn't close. Yeah, exactly. And same thing with the lulav.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think, and he's saying like, yeah, you could do that as long as you're planning to as long as it's the kind of knot that you untie every day. But if it's a knot that you normally would do that for and leave for 7 days, that might be a problem.
Yeah, I'm surprised by that. Based on that Biur Halacha we read.
Sure, that's fair. It's
Yeah.
by the way, I don't always know the Mishnah Berurah is consistent. It's also fair to say, it's like one of the hardest things for poskim to be completely consistent across the board with their shitot, right? Because there's just too many facts that you have to deal with at the end of the day. All right, we've got like 5 minutes. What do I want to do? Oh yeah, let's actually want to start with Seif Katan Vav. We've done Seif Aleph in the Shohar several times. I don't think we need to review the whole thing right now, but this is the in the Ashkenazi world, right? That that any kesher that isn't meant to be untied that day, right? The Rama says Yeshomrim shekol kesher she'eno asur le'atir be'oto hayom mikre shel kaima, right? So I wanted to read the Mishnah Berurah of Be'oto Hayom Atzmo. So Reuven, can you read that for us?
Yes. Okay. Be'oto Yom Atzmo. Right. So any kesher that's not made but to be untied Be'oto Yom Atzmo is considered shel kaima. That's what you said, right? Ela lemachar, aval im asui lahatir beleil motzei Shabbos lo mikre shel kaima klal umutar lechatchila. Okay. If this knot is made to be undone the night when after Shabbos ends, it's not called shel kaima. It's not in that category. It's permitted from the outset. ומיהו אם כושר בליל שבס קודש, ועשוי להתיר ביום שבס עצמו, אף על גב דאין ממש באותו יום, מכל מקום יש לומר דשארי. דכל פחות מכ"ד שעות.
Yes.
Okay, yeah. ביומו, mikre.
Mhm.
So 1 second. Nevertheless, if you tie this knot on Erev Shabbos, and you make it in order for it to be untied on the day of Shabbos itself, then even though even though it's like not, sorry, what'd you say?
Not mamash be'oto yom. It's not
Not
actually
mamash be'oto yom, right? It's not
actually the same day.
be'oto yom because you did it Erev Shabbos, and then you're intending for it to be untied on Shabbos. But nevertheless, there are grounds to say that it's permitted. Why? Because it's anything that's less than 24 hours, it's called biyomo.
Exactly.
Okay, that's
So-
interesting. I wouldn't have thought that.
It doesn't have to be biyomo. Doesn't mean that it has to be tied and untied on Shabbat itself. It just means that it has to be tied and untied within a 24-hour period.
Within the 24-hour period.
So you can imagine really freaking out about that, right? You know, like so this is a kula. I would say it's a kula of the Mishnah Berurahs here, the Pri Megadim really. All right, let's do oh yes, this is the other one I really wanted to do. Sif Katan Zayin. It's the next one. Look at that. But this is on the let me find out. This is the rule in the, it's actually very important in the Ramai. Says v'chein linyan hatarato dino kimo linyan kishirato, right? The rule, can you untie a knot, is the same as if you could tie the knot. If you could tie that knot, you could untie it, vice versa, right? You know, they're equal. Okay, and this is Zayin in the Mishnah Berurah. Ori, take it away for us.
Do you know כמו?
Yes.
רוצה לומר, אם הוא קשר שחייבים על קישורו, חייבים על היתרו. So he's saying that if it's a type of knot that you would be chayav on tying, you will be chayav on untying it. בכל שהוא פטור אבל אסור, או מותר לכתחילה, גם בהיתרו כן הוא. And the same thing goes for the other cases, patur or mutar. Untying is the same as tying. בכל קשר שמותר להתירו, אם אינו יכול להתירו, מותר לנתקו, אם הוא לצורך. And any knot that you're allowed to untie, mutar to untie, אם אינו יכול להתירו, מותר לנתקו. If you actually can't release it, if you can't release it, you could disconnect it if it's for
snap it, you cut it, right? You can so
cut it if it's for a need.
exactly, right. Your child creates like ties a knot but does it badly in some way that you can't undo it, right? It's they're playing around, they're tying and untying knots, it's like the bad knot that was meant to last. You can cut the knot. So
the only case that comes to mind is when the brush is stuck in the hair. That's a little different, but that is like a situation which, you consider bringing out the scissors.
Yeah, probably there on Shabbos you can't do that, but that's a different story.
Yeah. I figured it was a slightly different. Okay. Ve'en la'asot ken bifnei am ha'aretz. You shouldn't do that in front of an average person. Shelo yavo la'hakel yoter. You're gonna cause them to be that mekel or more mekel.
Exactly. Yeah, so you see this in the Mishnah Berurah, says other sources too. You see it already in the Gemara, right? We don't, ein morin ken, right? We don't tell people you could do this, right? Or you don't do it in front of the unwashed folk, because God forbid they should
the hoi polloi.
Exactly. They should be too lenient. But
it's interesting to use the term am ha'aretz for clearly someone who wants to do the right thing. Like the assumption of saying that the am ha'aretz is going to be too makil is that, like, the am ha'aretz is following halacha to some extent. We just think that the person's going to get the wrong idea. I feel like that's not always how am ha'aretz is used.
No, you're right. It's not. But there is a world. you know, are in it. Where, yeah, I mean, we know that I think we all, you know, the groups of people who are like, when can I find a kula, right? You know, I'm halachic. I'm an, you know, I'm an, you know, observant Jew, and I go for every kula I can ever find, right? You know, it's like, oh, I once saw this Rav do that. Oh, it must be mutar, right? You know, it's like, you know, I don't know.
This is one of our dangerous conversations that could open into a much broader conversation, but
we can open into what?
It just makes me think of so many other questions about observances and, you know, what's an average person's interest in observance and demonstrating behaviors. Because I identify with this because if you're going to just do it without explaining why it's allowed, it sort of opens up a whole class of other things that would potentially become common practice.
Seems like a Shiur series on rabbinics might be called for.
Yes. Also, wait, hold on one
for
second.
For a good conversation, yeah.